All right, is the thing on? It is. Okay, so I'm just writing a little plugin today. Basically, there's this RFE in our issue tracker about wanting access to the build's changelog as an environment variable to process it in some build steps or something. I bookmarked this long ago, and since I had nothing better to do for Hacksgiving today, I decided to implement this. And since I'm currently working on it, I think it's a tiny little plugin, but it should be a nice demo of how to set up a plugin for localization. So first of all, there's a bunch of different types of strings that need to be localized in the plugin. There's strings in Java. Just a second. Is this better? Someone wants more zoom. I say buy a bigger screen.
This looks fine to me. I mean, it's big enough to where on my little screen I can see it okay.
All right.
I just can't have
Other
it this
chick
small.
agrees. All right. So we have strings in Java, and we have strings in resources, and they have two. And we have help files, essentially. And those have slightly different solutions, and I'll just showcase them here. All right, so just an overview of what the plugin does. The idea is, let me see whether I managed to share a browser window that isn't too messy. All right, so this is a browser window with a plugin running. What it does is it adds a section to the job configuration where you can enable adding the changelog to the build environment variables. And there are three options here. One is how to format the overall entry with the author and date information, as well as the commit ID or revision and the commit message. And as part of the form validation, I'm providing a sample output here. So I can edit this field and see basically live how this will be rendered for some demo output. And the next part is the file item format, which is basically, if you look at the changelog for any given build, it contains both overall information, which revision is it, who's the author, what's the commit message, as well as which files are affected and in what way were they affected. Were they added? Were they deleted? And this is basically what this second form field allows you to configure how this looks. So maybe I want to have a nicer form item here, or explicitly say the action was this and the file path is this. So pretty straightforward. And that last form field allows you to provide the date format to be used in the overall commit information. So this is what the plugin does. You can see it has a few strings that are currently in English. And what I'll do next, I will prepare the plugin for localization and afterwards try to localize it in German. Let's see how well that goes. It's my native language, but I'm using all of my software in English, so that's probably pretty terrible. So switching back to the editor. There it is. All right, so let's start with strings in code. Actually, I've already prepared that, so let's just unbelievable. Let's just try to rip it out again so I can start from scratch. So as you can see, I now have a unlocalized string here. I have a bunch of other unlocalized strings, unlocalized error messages, and an unlocalized help file, and an unlocalized configuration form for my input fields. And since everything is hard-coded, I also have no way, if I'm a contributor who knows a non-English language, to just provide the resources needed to translate this, for example, into German, because the plugin right now is fundamentally not set up to be localized. So we will need to change this first. So let's see. In this case, for source code strings, the way to resolve this is to create a file called messages.properties in the resource package corresponding to the package where the classes are, and define key value pairs in the Java properties file format. For example, in this case, the display name. And what I do then is I run the Maven target localizer generate, which runs the localizer, which is part of the plugin build process. And if I do that, it will look for files called messages.properties and generate Java source code from those. And we can take a look here and see there's a new class named messages in the same package. And this is what will support localization. And instead of returning the raw untranslated string here, I will just reference the messages class and the method by the name of the key I just added to the resource file. And by doing that, if Jenkins is running, or if the user of Jenkins has a different accept language and the plugin has a matching localization, it will show the non-English string. And we can do basically the same for a bunch of other strings here. For example, let's see, what else do we have here? I mean, these error messages will be printed to the build log. And I think it's always a bit weird to have them in a different language, since it's not a per user setting, but a per instance setting. So I generally don't translate those. Those are nice. Okay, so those are the validation error messages shown to the user while he's editing the configuration form. Yeah. One last remark about the build error messages. I know plugins that translate those, and if the server Jenkins is running on gives Jenkins a different, I think on Linux it's the lang environment variable, those will be in that language. I'm not entirely sure what the expected behavior is, but I treat those with rather lower priority than strings that are localized per user, especially because if the server is, if you're in a large company and the server is, for example, in Germany and configured for German locale, and all your foreign colleagues need to deal with a build log that is in parts in German, this is just weird. So, but that's my personal opinion here. So, all right. So let's see. That's the. Yeah, I guess we can translate it. As I said, lower priority. It doesn't mean you don't need to do it. So, all right. So let's see. This is the error message for the line format error. Let's call this line format error. And we have the same string as entry format error, because we have 3 separate input fields. We have 3 separate possible error messages. And the last one is the date format error. I can use basically anything I want as key here. As long as it can reasonably translate to a Java identifier. In the case of the period, you will see that this will get replaced by an underscore when I access that static field. So we already covered this one. All right, sample output and something after it. Let's see whether I can manage this. This from memory, so this is the line format sample, which is sample output plus a placeholder. Let's see whether this works. And we repeat the same one for all 3 input fields, because it really looks the same here. I'll run that Maven build again to see whether this actually works. Looks good. So let's replace that with the line format error, as you can see, underscore rather than period. And what did I do here? What I did was, this uses the Java util text format, I believe, for supporting placeholders in these strings. And the default syntax is curly braces and then the index of the argument. And in the generated source code, this gets translated to having a parameter in that method. So this expects an object, and the object we're passing is the result message we want to show in the sample. Same with the entry format sample and the date format sample. Of course, I could have gone the easy way, skipped the placeholder and just did the string concatenation here. However, that would have failed in locales that maybe where the prefix colon actual example value doesn't work as well as in English. So translators have more flexibility when I use a placeholder like this. All right, all other strings seem to be fixed. As I said, we could add those as well. So that's how you translate strings that appear in Java. Those go into messages.properties files. Next, we will translate the strings we're using on the UI. For those, we will create properties files of the same name as their associated Jelly or Groovy, well, mostly Jelly view files in the same folder. And we will also replace those with placeholders here. It's a bit different than in Java. You can actually specify any string you want at this point. And if you have no properties files at all, it will not be translated, but just show this part without the $sign, the curly braces, and the %sign. So if you just want to prepare your plugin for localization, you can do this and you're done. However, if you're actually showing a more complex text on the UI, it's useful. Of course, I don't have something like that here, but assuming I have a paragraph of stuff here, while I could just wrap this in this localization marker, the problem is when I change it in a future release of the plugin, then all the translations for that will become invalid because this part is used as the key of in the properties file. So if I have a translation that looked a bit like this, we'll have to escape those spaces. If I do it like this, and the original text in the jelly file gets changed, it will no longer be translated into German, which may be what you want. However, there's a better approach, or one that's common in Jenkins core, and that is to basically give this a very generic identifier. So if some minor part of the string changes, you would have the properties file, which is English or the default translation, and you have a config_de properties file with the German translation. So as you can see here, we have entry format, file item format, date format, and this part at the end that says stuff. Let's keep this just as showcase how it works. And then there's the, and I'm translating this into German now. I'm skipping the umlaut here because this is, I think, some weird ISO encoding, and doing umlauts is just too cumbersome. All right, that should be it for those resources. So let's see what happens when I debug this. I'll switch over to the browser window. All right, looks good. So far, everything's in English. Let's see what happens when I change my accept language. Whether it actually works. Of course it did not. We still have entry format here. Why is that? Because I forgot to escape the space in the key with a backslash. Alright, but we have this one translated. The sample output is still in English, which it probably should not be. And what we've also not translated is the text, help text we have. I did not yet do that. All right, let's switch back to the IDE. Never do ad hoc demos because you're going to get it wrong anyway.
Part of what makes it exciting.
Right, nothing better to do at 9 in the evening. All right. So let's see, how do we translate the help files? I'm pretty sure it looks just like this. Just a second. And when my browser is in German, it should show the German help. Alright, can I figure out why this one has not been translated? Yes, because I did not provide a German resource file. So let's do that now. So this is the corresponding German properties file for the strings and messages. And I translated date format only into German so far. I think this should be good enough. To demo it again, because now everything should be translated other than 2 of 3 help files, but it should show the concept properly. So I'm still waiting for the instance to come up. It's still in German, and I did not change anything about the English resources. So hopefully my plugins, labels, help texts, and validation messages are now all in German. All right, validation is German. The rest here is in English because that's directly from the format string. Also German, and I translated the date format, and this is also German. So everything I have, strings referenced in Java code, strings specified in Jelly resources, and help files in HTML are all localizable and localized into German in this example here. Any questions?
Okay, you have the sidebar open?
I can see it in the speech bubbles. How to pass a variable. I mean, I did that in the code. Do you mean what I did with the placeholder here? Right. Let's see. Assuming you have config.de. Okay. How would that work? I mean, what you're doing is you basically call a method here. I need to think about this just a second. I would expect that to basically work just like in the other one. Let's see whether I have something interesting here. Switching back to the IDE. What I'm doing is writing a getter that will be available in the config form. At least I think it should be. And I will just reference that in config jelly. So let's add a second paragraph afterwards and read some text property. Let's see that this works first, and then we can work on integrating this with localization. All right, I'm back in the configuration. Let's see whether what I just did worked. For some reason it is completely missing. So let's try this differently. Doesn't like it. Okay, let's go directly to the translation part. that one seems to work. It's a bit stupid, but whatever.
You can't see the code, just so you know.
Yeah, just a second. Okay, so that makes sense. All right, what I did was the label looks like this now. I'll just copy this over. And now I'll show you how I made that appear in the IDE. I started just like before. What you can do here is, with this format string, you can specify parameters like this. Basically, when you saw date format 1, this is how I did that. And what you can also do in this expression is to access objects that have been injected into the environment and access properties of those. In this case, I can just print the full name of the current project rather than a property of this build wrapper. And in the properties file, when you do this, you will also need a English translation, because otherwise Jenkins will not know how to display this. So what I did was I defined the key date format and date format as before, and then in parentheses the placeholder for whatever I'm trying to show. And what I do now is I will also translate this into German. Looks exactly the same. So let's restart to see what this looks like. Actually, I wouldn't have had to restart it, because if you only change jelly files and properties files related to the jelly files, it loads those dynamically. So that would have just taken a reload of the browser window. As you can see, this is the German localization of the string, with the placeholder getting replaced by the full name of this project. So this is how you insert variables here. I'm actually not sure what happens when I have a more traditional string here. Let me try this. It may work, it may not, but since you cannot use the raw string here without any translation, it doesn't really make sense to make it look nice in this file. So let me reload and see what happens. Still works. Okay, cool. So just pass arguments in parentheses at the end of your localized format string and define the format strings with a placeholder here. You should also be able to pass multiple parameters. So So that's something I haven't shown before. But of course, you can also pass multiple parameters here. So let's see whether this works. Yep, works just as well. Actually, these placeholders are a lot more powerful than what I'm showing here. They also support, for example, binary choices. So what you can do is have completely different translations for when you have 0 of a given number, 1 of a given number, or 2 or more. And you do this entirely in the localization. So for example, if the UI shows you how many jobs you have, and it's like a number jobs, you can really do no jobs for 0, 1 job for 1, or n jobs if you have more than those, and don't have to do something weird like job open parentheses 0 close open as close, because you don't know how many of those you have. All right, Alexander, was that clear so far? Did it help you? All right, awesome. Other questions?
That was really informative, Daniel. Thanks for doing that. I'll try to convince Steven to cover localization to this level of depth in his session tomorrow.
So you want this session to never end, huh?
Unfortunately, Google provides a hard limit on how long our sessions can go.
Really? 8 hours? Is that the limit? Or what do you mean? What's the limit?
Yeah, that's the longest you can schedule a hangout on air.
Wow, okay, so it's not something for workaholics.
So let me look at the time. It means we've got 2.5. Oh, yeah. I second Alexander's request to push this code somewhere, even if it's not ready to be published yet.
All right.
With the for the people in the stream and the people in the room, we've got 2.5 more hours. Daniel, if you want to keep live coding, what I'll do is I can put the trance music back on, and
Yeah,
then
I mean,
you can mute me if you want to.
I think I'm done with the plugin, so I need another idea. I mean, I haven't tested it for workflow, but otherwise, it seems to work fine, more or less. The date format broke just now, but yeah, and I mean, who needs tests? So I'm really done here. But yeah, I think I can continue if someone comes up with an idea for a simple plugin that basically just illustrates how to write one. Or I mean, we have a few viewers right now. Maybe you have specific requests or specific questions other than what's that? Groovy CLI in Jenkins for debugging. I've never used Groovy in the CLI. Or do you just mean the Groovy script console? Okay.
Hey Daniel.
Yeah.
I'm gonna step out and mute myself. I'll probably be
Okay.
back in 10-15 minutes, but
All
if you
right.
want to turn trance back on, just unmute me.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Something specific, a performance issue, or what are you asking about? Because most of the time when I use the Groovy script console, it's not debugging or finding issues of some kind, but more like I want to know more about my Jenkins instance and build statistics of some kind. So what kind of debugging are you looking for? All right, let's see what I can come up with. All right, this is the Jenkins demo instance that's still running this changelog environment plugin. Never click this button on your production instance. So where is it? Script console. So what the script console allows you to do is execute arbitrary code in the context of Jenkins, which can be really powerful and really dangerous. I somehow managed to convince Jenkins that every build step in every job is a batch file build step. That was 2 or 3 years ago. That was really not pretty, and even reloading from disk didn't help. So, and that was the production instance. So, you should be really, really careful what you're doing here. So, in general, what could we want to find out about our Jenkins instance? For example, in an instance I was responsible for a few years until I changed jobs. One of my key ones was to prevent the proliferation of complex job configurations. We wanted jobs to have the minimum number of reasonably possible build steps, just to make it easier to investigate things and reproduce it in the problems independent of Jenkins. And we wanted any scripts that are longer than a few lines to be stored in SCM. And once more than a few dozen people start configuring stuff on your Jenkins instance, It's not enough to be disciplined yourself or within your team. You really need some kind of tooling that tells you what the worst jobs are among the hundreds you may have. So let's see. Of course, the problem with use of the script console for something like this is you actually need to learn the Jenkins object model to be able to use it in any useful way. So it's almost like writing a Jenkins plugin, except you don't get an IDE to autocomplete things for you. Right, a very basic script, which just prints all job names. I have a single job, so that's not too interesting. Let's see. I want to find all jobs that use my incredibly useful changelog annotation I just wrote. So let's see whether this exists. And it does. All right. Very nice. So this site, javadoc.jenkinsci.org, is the online version of the newest version of Jenkins's Java source code documentation with all the types that are part of Jenkins core. And it's really useful to kind of find things available in Jenkins, so you can query things for information. All right. So we actually get a map here. So I need to query the key to check for whether this is equivalent to this type, and it'll if basically I'm iterating over all projects, then I'm iterating over all build wrappers in these projects, and it's a map that gives me map entries, basically key value pairs with a getter get key, and I look whether that one is of this type, and if it is, I print the project name. So let's see. Assuming I create a new job called bar, of the same type and do not have this build wrapper in there. It should not show up here. And it does not. Now I will configure the build wrapper in this new job. And ideally it will show up now because it uses this build wrapper. Of course, I can also print information about this wrapper. So this is the descriptor. We want the value. And we want to know the date format used for this particular job. Foo was configured properly with the sample string. Bar was not. So maybe I only want to show the jobs that don't have, that are use this but aren't configured to actually show something. So now I can just compare the date format it's using to null or the empty string. I believe this is how it works in Groovy. And if this is the, and any jobs that show up here use this changelog environment, but do not specify a date format. And this is basically how you can navigate through or across your projects and find out information about your Jenkins instance. What I used to do was I used the Groovy plugin for this. You could also use Scriptler. What I did in Groovy, I basically started with a, how does this work? This new string buffer. And whatever output I had, I appended to the string buffer. And in the end, I printed the string buffer. Let's see whether this works. It looks like it. And what I did was, what do you mean by global Groovy scripts, Christian? Oh, okay. So the question is whether one can use global Groovy scripts central. I'm still not entirely sure what you mean. So let me explain what I did. I had the desire to collect a bunch of different statistics about my instance. For example, I wanted to get a list of jobs and builds that were configured to be kept around forever, because we had pretty bad disk usage constraints back then, or rather, we had tons of free disk space, but also giant build output. So I wanted to know what builds were configured to never get deleted. I wanted to know what jobs were configured to keep more than a certain number of builds. And what you can do is with the Groovy plugin, and I'm not entirely sure whether it was a good idea to do this, but I did it anyway. I had a job that basically checked out a location from Subversion, it was back then, and this, and then had a system Groovy build step run those scripts I checked out from Subversion. So those scripts in Subversion had access to the entire Jenkins object graph and generated HTML files into the workspace, which I then had Jenkins archive and allowed me to browse them. So in that way, it was centrally defined. But if you're asking whether you can use centrally defined Groovy scripts with the script console, you cannot do it using the user interface. You can only do that if you use the script console via the Jenkins remote API or the Jenkins CLI. Because then you can just, check out your scripts from SCM and have a batch file execute the scripts and get the input back. If you go to the CLI endpoint, you can see here, where is it, Groovy. So there's the Groovy CLI command, which lets you execute a Groovy script. And this Groovy script will also have access to all of the Jenkins objects and everything. There's a plugin called Scriptler that allows you to do something similar. So let's see. And this plugin allows you to manage scripts within. You already found it. Okay, so this plugin lets you manage scripts in Jenkins and run those. However, compared to my earlier suggestion, those can only be run manually. On the other hand, they take parameters. So depending on what exactly you need, it's either better or worse than what I had just suggested earlier. One thing of note here, I think Scriptler says that you can allow users to run a script if they have the run scripts permission. Anyone with run scripts permission can run arbitrary scripts in your Jenkins instance. This is an even more powerful permission than administering at Jenkins, because administering only allows you what you are allowed to do on the UI. If you can run scripts, you can run arbitrary scripts. So this is a bit misleading, and the usual matrix authentication plugin or matrix authorization plugin UI doesn't help with this either. What you need to know is run scripts is a more powerful permission than administering things. So it's not really possible to use this to make these scripts available to users without giving them immense power over your Jenkins instance.